Welcome to Alabama Justice Lawyering Up. My name is Richard Jaffe, the senior partner in the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. We are going to explore with you the hottest cases, the most controversial topics of Alabama justice, and we're going to bring to you exciting key players that make our Alabama justice work or not work. We look forward to having you. Welcome to Alabama Justice, another exciting show, and tonight we have Randal Padgett and Brenda Padgett, and we are going to talk about exonerations and the death penalty. And by the way, I'm Richard Jaffe from the law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight, and I'm glad to be your host tonight. Well, welcome, folks.
Thank you, Richard.
Great to see you guys again. Let's start with you, Brenda. When I met you, you weren't Brenda Padgett, were you?
No, sir. I was Brenda Massingill.
All right. And tell the viewers basically how and why we met and when.
I had a friend that I'd worked with for many years that had been wrongfully accused of a crime that he did not commit. So I came down to 16th Street Baptist Church to meet you and to try to see you that day to ask you what you thought about his case.
I remember that day because I was one of the speakers about the death penalty at the 16th Street Baptist Church. And you approached me afterwards and wanted to talk about Randal's case, correct?
Correct.
Did you know Randal Padgett then?
Yes. I had worked with Randal for 10 years in a company in Arab, Alabama. We were not friends that had known each other all our lives. We were just friends who spoke to each other and asked, how are you, how's your family, that kind of relationship.
Well, as I recall that meeting, after I spoke, you approached me in the courtyard and you asked me if I'd ever heard of Randal Padgett's case in Huntsville, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I told you no. And what did you proceed to tell me?
I told you that I believed in Randal's innocence and that he was represented at that time by another attorney, but because I'd heard good things about you and you had been recommended by a friend, I wanted to know if there was any way that you could look into his case and see what might be done differently.
And that was in what year?
I believe that was 1993 that I met you.
And I remember sharing with you that Randal had very good attorneys, and as a result of that, I wouldn't be able to help, but if anything came up in the future to call me, and of course later on, you and Randal's family did. What was Randal charged with?
Randal was charged with capital murder. His wife had been stabbed many times in her home while she was asleep, and Randal had been charged with that crime, and at that time he had been convicted when I spoke with you.
Well, actually, he had not been convicted, but it was the second time we spoke that he did, in my recollection. But either way, ultimately, I became Randal's lawyer after his case was overturned because of a DNA problem.
Correct.
Let's talk about a little bit with you, Randal. So what was it like when you first learned that you were the prime suspect in the stabbing and supposed rape of your wife?
Well, it was kind of like a dream, but I'd always heard that the spouse is usually the first person the police look at, so I kind of expected that. But what I didn't ever expect was an arrest. I never expected to be arrested.
And that arrest occurred when supposedly they found your DNA in Kathy's body.
That's what they said.
Okay. Now, during that period of time, you were represented by some really good lawyers in Huntsville.
It was a lawyer that came recommended to me. That was the first time I'd ever had need of a lawyer. I'd never been arrested before, and had some good words about him, and I hired him.
Now, you and Kathy were separated at the
Yes.
time, and you were basically planning to get a divorce and were seeing another woman by the name of Judy.
That's correct.
Okay. And how long had you been seeing Judy?
3 or 4 years.
And how did you meet Judy?
Something I'm terribly ashamed of. But,
Sure.
But that happened. We worked together. And our whole episode together started out as a joke and then escalated. I guess the devil got in my head.
And I appreciate you sharing that because it can happen to anybody. So you ultimately get charged and you have a trial in Marshall County.
All right.
And what happened in that trial?
Well, I think, that's been a long time ago, but I think the trial lasted about 2 weeks, and most of the testimony was, DNA was new back then. Most testimony was from DNA experts from different parts of the country, and they were just explaining how DNA worked.
And what did the jury do after this 2-week trial?
Well, I noticed some of them were sleeping during the testimony, but after the 2-week trial, they found me guilty.
And now, after a jury finds someone guilty in Alabama, then there's a sentencing hearing, correct?
Yes.
And what happened at the sentencing hearing? What did the jury recommend to the judge?
Well, there were 2 possible sentences I could get. The jury recommended life without parole.
As opposed to death.
Correct.
And what did it feel like when you were actually listening and hearing the words guilty before the sentencing hearing?
Well, I couldn't believe it. It was a very scary thought, and I'm wondering why do these people not believe me? How can they believe?
You testified, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
How can they believe I did such a thing?
Now, Randal, back then, and this was just abolished a few months ago, but back then, a trial court could overrule a jury and impose death if the trial court wanted to.
Yes.
And did that happen with you in that case?
Yeah, after my conviction, I stayed in jail about 6 weeks, I think, before a sentence was handed down. And the judge overrode the life without that the jury recommended and sentenced me to the electric chair.
And what was that like?
It was like a nightmare. It felt like being in a whole different planet. I don't know how to explain it, but it was terrible.
And did you retain the support of your family and your 2 kids and your sisters and brothers and your parents?
Yeah, they all supported me, and I had a lot of good friends that supported me. They knew I couldn't have done such a thing.
And you never even had a parking ticket, did you, Harvey?
No.
Let me ask you one more question, and we'll go to a break. I'm going to ask Brenda first, then I'm going to ask you. Brenda, you come from a law enforcement family, correct?
Yes, my son is in law enforcement.
And he was in the sheriff's department in Marshall County at the time of Randal's case, or close to it.
Well, he was actually working in Anniston at the time.
I see.
But
what were your feelings about the death penalty at the time that Randal was accused of murder?
I was raised in a family that believed in the death penalty, that if it went far enough that you were arrested, you were tried, you were convicted, then you were guilty. We believed in the system of justice. So,
and that's biblical too, isn't it?
Yes.
In some sense.
In some sense.
What are your feelings now about the death penalty?
I know that innocent people are sent to death row. I know that innocent people are charged every day for crimes that they did not commit. And I believe that the death penalty is faulty at best, and that we don't need
and you're
to
actually
be putting people to death.
Now married to someone, the person sitting next to you, Randal Padgett, who was actually on death row in Alabama.
Yes.
Well, let me do this. Let's go to a break, and we'll come back with more of the extraordinary story of Randal and Brenda Padgett, a cross between fatal attraction and presumed innocence. See you in a minute. I'm Richard Jaffe, senior partner in the law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. And with me is Mike Hanle, who has handled many, many, many federal cases, among other cases. Mike, what would you do if you received a call, like you do often, from someone who believes they're a subject or a target of a federal criminal investigation?
Well, the most important thing to do is to immediately reach out to the U.S. Attorney's Office to find out who is the principal U.S. Attorney that's handling that case, and you can begin to have a dialogue with that person.
And why is it important to do that?
Well, it allows us to participate in the shaping of the case, how that case will ultimately maybe be charged or not charged at all.
And what are federal sentencing guidelines?
Well, the federal sentencing guidelines are a complex series of calculations that begin with an offense level for each criminal charge, and it includes the calculation of your criminal history, which is your prior criminal conduct.
We at Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight are ready, willing, and able to talk with you or anyone in your family at any time if you find yourself in a position where you need someone experienced in the federal courts. Welcome back to Alabama Justice Lawyering Up. And my guests, both of them, Randal and Brenda Padgett. So let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be falsely accused of something you didn't do and on Alabama's death row facing execution with little hope.
Well, it's a hard thing to explain. It's be bad enough to be on death row for something you did, but to be there knowing you were completely innocent, it plays on your mind heavy. It's like I said, it seemed like I was on a different planet, and I was forgotten by society. I was thrown there to die, and if it weren't for the letters and the few phone calls that I got made to my family, I don't know if I could have survived, knowing that people wanted to kill me for something I didn't do.
You know, a lot of people think that prisons are country clubs, that they're just a lot of frills and fun and great food and TV and recreation. What was death row really like?
Well, I've never been to a country club, but I imagine they're a lot better than Death Row, which is not like I imagine a country club to be. My cell was, I think, about 5 feet by 9 feet. My bunk served as my chair, my stool. The only piece of furniture I had was my bunk, which was attached to the wall. You could take 2 steps before you hit the bars, and then your toilet and sink was all together. You got plenty of cockroaches and rats for friends. Food is terrible. And you had to stay in that cell, which is probably smaller than most people's bathrooms, 23 hours a day, unless it rained, and then you had to stay in there 24 hours a day. So multiply that by years, and it's not like a country club. And we had no air conditioning. I can remember laying in the concrete floor in a puddle of sweat. In wintertime, they said we had heat, but I never did feel any.
Now, how long were you on death row?
I was incarcerated altogether for about 5.5 years. I spent about 3 or 3.5 on death row. 3.5 on death row.
Now, at some point, now let me just get to this. Now, this is single cell, correct?
Correct.
So how would you get to know other inmates on death row facing execution?
Well, the 30 minutes a day you got out of your cell, we got to go out on a little yard with about, 30 or 40 other death row inmates. And you could talk to them. And if it's someone in a cell adjacent to you, you couldn't see them, but you could talk. They had an upstairs and a downstairs and a little catwalk. So you could hear what's going on upstairs and downstairs too. I was on the downstairs level. But some of those guys were actually nice guys. Some people were nice to me and had a good conscience, and some of the people were evil. But I got to know several, and the one I got to know pretty well was executed while I was there, and that was a bad feeling.
Who was that?
Vernell Weeks.
Mm-hmm.